All right, here we go.
What's good, everybody? I'm Robert Dickens Jr.
This is Ryan Reed.
This is Elanders Frazier.
This is John Gaal, and you're listening to Volta.
Changing the conversation
For percussion educators,
Designers,
And performers.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm Robert, Elanders, Ryan, and John Gaal. We are the Volta Percussion crew. So excited to have you guys checking out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, on YouTube, or you're checking out a clip on at Volta Percussion on Instagram or on any other podcast sites and whatnot. So of course, we're always changing the conversation for performers, educators, and designers. So we are getting ready to get into this episode, which is really going to be about I think a good topic, just because of the pandemic currently, is best practices for video assignments, and how do you integrate that into your education system and things like that. So I guess first I really want to talk to just get everyone to give me some feedback on how important do you think videos are now that we are virtual? Like, how has that changed how you've approached things? So, Elanders, you want to jump in there?
Yeah. So I'll kickstart just because I don't have any active students right now. So I'll say with the culture that we have, so I'll kind of speak in broad terms because y'all will be able to get more specific with your programs. So I'll say with the culture that we have, and this has been shifting well before the pandemic started, right? Like, it's been shifting into a culture of students taking videos of themselves and posting it, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is. TikTok is now huge, right? So this culture has shifted of students taking videos of themselves and posting for the world to see, whether it's for feedback, commentary, if it's just to mini performances to show what you've got, or if it's just doing it just to do it. You know what I mean? Like, we were trending in that direction well before the pandemic. So the good thing I will say about video, the subject matter of taking videos, is that students were already doing it before it became a requirement. So it's not that it was this major transition for a lot of students. For a lot of students, they already knew how to do it. They already had the platform set up. They either already had microphones or ring lights. Some students already had like the whole system packed and ready to go. They were just waiting on somebody to test that requirement. And then, I'm sure there are a few students that had not participated in that, function or in posting videos for stuff like that. But those, I would think that that's the few and not the many. I think that the majority of students are used to getting online with their friends and doing selfie videos and stuff like that for different platforms. So I think that that was one of the good things that happened with the pandemic, is that we moved to a model that really was not too hard to transition to for students. And then I think the biggest thing is that now we're in a situation to where the technology is so good. And like, I think about if a pandemic happened 10 years ago, what would we have done? Like, 10 years ago was 2011. Phones were okay, but not that good, right? We would be collecting videotapes, like everything would be in 480p. Like, it would be a travesty trying to get like video assignments done 10 years ago. So I really think it's almost like the time that we're currently in just haphazardly fit the model of the circumstances that kind of happened to us. Like, if this pandemic happened anywhere in the past, we would be trying to find some other solution, like send me an audio recording of you playing, because that would probably be the best media format that existed. But it's like, now we can get pretty good audio and video from our students at the drop of a dime in short spurts, whether it's through Dropbox or Google Drive or the band app. We've got all these different applications now that just make it easy for us to be able to digest this content so that educators can come in now and mark off those assignments, make sure they check them off, provide commentary and feedback, whether it's instantaneous or whether it's in a full classroom, if you're talking about Skype or Zoom, or then if it's just, send an email and I'm sending commentary back to each individual student on a weekly basis, depending upon the assignments that, are written by the educator and pre-planned ahead. So I really think that the technology being present has really been a blessing for the environment that we're currently in. And I don't know what situation we would be in had the technology been present. So I guess I'll say, to preface this conversation, is that we're in a good situation regardless of the best practices that we're getting ready to discuss, but it's just about tailoring it to your individual program. And I think that's the biggest key point that everyone has to remember is, like, if you are taking video assignments from your students, and, some people do it in a Facebook group and they do it that way. I know in the past with Southwind, with the drum corps, we did it in a Facebook group. We accepted by email, stuff like that. It just depends on what's going to be best for your students to be able to upload, and then what's going to be the best format for you to view it and be able to get that commentary back to them. So
cool. Ryan, how has video assignments and technology and stuff like that change things for you as far as your teaching style?
I think the biggest change has been evaluating the students more, being able to evaluate the students more frequently, and not having to take class time necessarily to do it. We use an app called Flipgrid. So we discovered this back in March, and we would just do, back then we were doing, a once a week assignment or something like that. Just to kind of check in with the kids. But that was when school first shut down and we first went into isolation. So a lot of that time was more about making sure that the kids were right, like mentally and emotionally and whatnot, and not overloading them with homework or video assignments and that kind of stuff. But now we've integrated Flipgrid a little bit more into like our teaching time. So if I work on a skill set throughout a class period, I can then give them a Flipgrid assignment that's due, 2 days later, a day later that night, a week later or something like that, of like, hey, spend some time, work on this, the skill set, or work on this chunk of music, and then send me the Flipgrid. And it allows me to evaluate them in real time at my own ability to do it. So I'm not having to sit down and I'm not having to take class time to evaluate them all one by one, and I'm not having to sit down and do it straight shot. I can watch a couple kids and then watch a couple kids in between, like a busy lesson schedule or whatever. So I think that's been the biggest improvement. And then doing auditions through video, which, we're seeing drum corps and indoor groups we're doing / are doing, is that we did marching band auditions, and we auditioned for our top concert band at my school. So we did our concert band auditions through Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is great for videos that are 10 minutes or less. But for longer form videos, obviously you want a kid to upload it to like YouTube as an unlisted video and send it, or share it through Drive or Dropbox like Elanders was saying. But I think for those short form videos, not like TikTok short or Instagram short, but, 10 minutes or less, what is that? A Quibi is like 8 minutes or whatever. A super Quibi worth of time. Flipgrid has been amazing for. And again, you can record it straight to the app. So it's not like the kids need to record it and then upload it. You can record it straight to the app and it's done. So there's no worry about like it getting uploaded or lost in transition. Like it's into the app. Flipgrid recently being, I don't know when it actually happened, created the ability for instructors to give video feedback. So it used to be, when I first was on Flipgrid, like I was like typing out comments to kids and sending them through that, and then hoping that they got them through their email that was registered or whatever. And then I would have a million kids go, I forget which email I used, or I don't actually use that email. I just used it to sign up for Flipgrid. Now I can like record it and send it straight back to them. It's still in Flipgrid, so they can watch it that way. And then another cool thing that I've done, I didn't do this with my high school, but we did this for our virtual auditions with Matrix, was kids would send us their YouTube links. And for video feedback, we would open their unlisted YouTube link in a personal Zoom call and record our feedback in real time, which I think is helpful to students because we could rewind it and move it forward and this and that, and we were reacting in real time, whereas we've all done video assignments where the students send us their video and then we type out the feedback and give it to them. Now we can talk to them, we can pause the video and jump up and demonstrate what to work on a pad or on a keyboard, and then resume their video and just keep giving feedback over that. And I received a bunch of feedback from kids about that, of just how helpful it was to get feedback in that real time, so they could hear what they were doing and hear me talking about it at the exact same time. And I've tried to do a lot more of that when I'm doing the video assignment stuff, because I think the written word over the email over the video only goes so far, but to hear you talking about it has really helped a lot of students, I found.
Now, Ryan, did you say you do that during private lessons or during class, or when do you do that?
So that is like homework. The Flipgrid assignment stuff is like homework. And then when I get to evaluate them is basically, I do it after, like, take homework for myself, but it allows me, again, because it's all on Flipgrid, it allows me the flexibility to like watch a couple and do feedback and then make dinner and then watch a couple, or teach a lesson and then do a couple, and that kind of thing. So it allows me to not have to take class time and have to go one by one through a class period. And I still do a lot of that stuff, but in order to get extra assessments for the kid and extra feedback for kids.
I'm sorry, I was asking about when you play the video live stream with them in your Zoom meeting or whatnot.
So no, that's not a private lesson. So that's me recording a Zoom call with just myself. So it's just me, like I open Zoom by myself and I share their feedback, and then I create basically a feedback video. So they send me their video audition,
Gotcha.
And then I create a feedback video and send that to them.
Okay, very cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. I'm really interested now, because I had a couple ideas just from what you guys were saying before about how auditions in the future might be different as far as public health and safety in general. I wonder how much more beneficial. Well, I'll start by saying, depending on the level of education when it comes to drum corps and WGI, there's more than likely a mix of education and competition. And obviously, the lower you are down in the class system, more than likely there's more education going on versus competition. Whereas if you're going somewhere that's top 3, top 6, it is 100%, going to be on the competition side. Either you know the information or you don't. But it's kind of tricky for us, specifically in open class, like how do we navigate that? Because on one hand, you're trying to give the students the best educational process as possible so they get all the information. But on the other hand, you don't want to scare away the talent that is coming there to compete for a spot. And I'm wondering what you guys think as to how video auditions might change the future of, let's say, drum corps auditions or WGI auditions. Whereas, let's say, for instance, if a student sent in their, them playing down the packet and getting, their feedback on whatever that was, would that then allow them to, when they come to auditions, strictly compete because they already have the information to see what it is that they can do on the fly? You know what I'm saying? Versus trying to teach them every individual thing, because obviously with the audition packet, it's not always, like Ryan was saying, it's not a video. So I can only go into so much detail in a written scenario. So how would that change things as far as drum corps moving forward? Maybe it might allow, in my mind at least, it might allow the auditions to actually be auditions versus clinics, which is what I feel like it kind of turns into sometimes at open class. Like, do you think that videos could be integrated in a way that could make that a little bit better of a process?
I think it's always going to come down to the category and the age you're teaching. So open class with our typical high school student, I think you're always still going to have to go over the educational aspects. Even if you're top 5 in the open class, you still have to hit the educational aspects. I think, though, with the whole video assignments and the video auditions, even though you may hit the educational aspects, content during a weekend camp or whatnot, I think you can still hammer the audition aspect of it harder and throw more curveballs towards the students, because you've already either established that educational content in person at the camp for the first couple hours, or you've already provided feedback on their video submissions. So it helps you maybe quicken the pace of the audition process rather than spending too much time on the initial educational content. But it also depends on what your goals are for your core and your group in general. If it's a rebuilding year or if it's a really competitive year.
Yeah, I think well, a couple things. I think you'll see more groups put out educational video downloads, DVDs specific to their group is kind of my assumption. And because we already saw the move towards educational downloads and whatnot. WGI started doing some of them. We had the marching arts, I can't remember what it was, where they did their summer of drum corps last year, where it's like every corps came on and talked a little bit about programs, and some even came on and demonstrated things and that kind of stuff. And I think you'll start to see groups, now that video auditions are the primary audition for, the drum corps season in 2021, and were some of the primary auditions for most of the indoor groups for their 2021. I think we'll start to see that, because then you can supplement the written packet with like demonstrations of the instructors. And ideally, if somebody is teaching your group, they're producing the technique and sounds that the group wants. So really, at that point, students can download that stuff and go, all right, I got to make it look and sound like this, period. And they might not get the exact verbiage and like quick feedback that they're used to at camps, but they have constant access to that information now, or more constant access to that information through downloads and whatnot. I think that'll also be a fundraiser for indoor groups and drum corps to help off some of the costs of, having to take a year off, or having, just a financial burden in 2020. But I also think that you'll start to see some use video auditions as their primary auditions, and that you won't see some groups call in people until like a callback type scenario. One, to cut back on the number of people in any given space, depending on the situation of the world, depending on where the world is at. I think you could see that happening, but also think about in terms of drum corps, every time a corps goes somewhere, unless they own a building, that's a school that they have to get permission to be in, or that they have a facility that they have to pay for and rent out. Whereas if they just do it over video, they don't have to fly their instructors in, they don't have to pay for that food, they don't have to pay for all of that. So I think you will see in the future some preliminary auditions move to a more video-based audition instead of live and in person. Not everyone will do that, obviously, but I think some groups will.
Are you gonna go? You want me to go?
Go ahead. I've been thinking about something, but
I'll let you go because I got some other stuff too.
While y'all were talking, I was thinking about it might have been a conversation we had 2 or 3 weeks ago about a rankings board. I think Ryan brought it up about rankings boards being posted like out in the forefront, like for students to see like where they're at. And I could see like with video assignments, like if there's a way to like log into the website so that's not like public to everybody, but like if you're an auditionee and you're auditioning, you can log in and see where you're currently at on the rankings board. And I think that could drive some of the education too, you know, in terms of video assignments that way. Because I know for me as a performer, if I were sending in a video audition, it's one thing to see where my personal level is. But like to Rob's point, if your concept is that I'm coming and I'm competing for a spot, I want to know where I measure up against everybody else. And like, that's the primary driver for me to continue moving forward. Like, it's great to know where I'm at. So if I get a 10, like 1 out of 10, or, you know, I'm at an 8 out of 10 on my personal audition level, I don't know how many other 8s are there. If that's the only thing I get on my feedback record is that I'm just an 8, you know, there could be 38s, you know what I mean? But if I can log into a dashboard that shows me where my current ranking is, and it says, all right, I'm sitting 8th out of 20 drummers, or I'm sitting, you know, 10th out of 20 drummers, and I know they're taking 9 snares for the summer. Like, I'm looking at, okay, how do I make sure that I'm in coming into this callback audition? Like, I need to, you know, amp it up to jump, you know, into this next category, you know, and looking at that dashboard to kind of see like, where do I rank against the next person? So, you know, I think there are different ways that it can be done, but I could see that becoming another way of, when we talk about a best practice, and this may be a more of a best practice on the educational side, not the performer side, but just from a director standpoint to say, how do we make sure that the talent that's coming in is going to put forth their best effort, the same that they would be if they were in the camp scenario? Because in a camp scenario, what happens? We start separating them into groups, and we start, you know, delving out material based on the groups and then switching them around. Letting them see where they're at on a dashboard could accomplish the same thing in terms of them seeing live where they're at based on their audition material. And then if they go through a second round of video auditions, you start seeing numbers flip, et cetera, based on where they're at. Now it's like we're doing a legitimate camp, all virtual, you know what I mean? And it's all done through dashboards. It's all done through video assignments. And that could be a feasible way of getting students to engage into the process of, where am I currently at? How am I doing? They get the educational feedback, but they also see the live competition that's going on while they're doing the audition. And then when they do finally get to that callback camp, it's, I made it through the trial and tribulation of going through this audition process and seeing how I progressed from one level audition to the next level audition. And maybe I came in at number 9, but I finished my second audition at number 4, or I finished my second audition at number 7, because I made improvements over time. You know what I mean? So that could be just a heads up to our designers and our educators in terms of different ways to think outside of the box of how they can turn those video auditions. And this could work for high schoolers too, turning those video auditions into a methodology for them to be able to see where they're at. You could do it by Google Drive, giving every student access to a spreadsheet that shows where their ranking is on Google Drive. It doesn't have to be automated or anything like that, like, you know, things that we see out in the world, but it could be a very simple tool system that allows them to just log into that format that's private, so that not everybody can see it, but just the students that are auditioning, so that they can see where they're at, where they stack up. And I think it'll still continue to drive that competitive aspect that I think draws a lot of people into the activity. You know, a lot of people Some students are coming in just for the education and for the feedback for maybe the first or two times. And then to Rob's point, a lot of students, once they get that first or second feedback feeling, now they really want to come in and see, how do I stack up against 20 other marimba players on this side of the country? How do I stack up against, 12 other drum set players in this specific area? Like, these are things that they focus on, and which is why they're going to audition for certain groups, so that they can see where they measure against certain individuals depending upon where they're auditioning.
The great thing about the video auditions is that it broadens the scope of the amount of people who can audition. Right. And like you were saying, comparing marimba players or drum set players, students who are auditioning all across the country, like if a student wanted to come down and audition for Southwind, and they lived in Washington, the state of Washington, I mean, the travel costs, they're never going to take that trip. But with video auditions, I mean, they have instantaneous feedback after they submit, which I think helps multiple students audition for any group that they're interested in, and maybe not so much regional base. An issue with video auditions or a couple issues that I've noticed is number one, the camera quality or the microphone quality. Ryan, when you were talking about Flipgrids, and I use that with my own band for assignments. When we were first starting the Flipgrid assignments out back in the fall, if the brass players were facing directly at the computer, because all my students have the Flipgrid on their Chromebook, so if they were facing directly at the computer or even slightly off, I meant the audio quality was terrible. And so having to adjudicate that on a weekly or a daily basis, whatnot, for the assignment, you do need to make sure, if you're going to have video auditions, video assignments, that you have some protocols in place. How far back or how far close the student needs to be, how much of the student should be showing. Like for a drummer, we want to see the feet marking time to make sure they're actually with the metronome, right? For a keyboard player, we want to see at least the keyboard and the top half, right? And making sure it's horizontal and not vertical, just so we can maximize the depth perception and we can see a clear picture of the student and the tech and their technique. So really focusing on the video quality and the camera quality are some issues, because maybe some students have a higher budget with them personally, so they can afford a higher quality camera or computer or whatnot, whereas some students don't. And so as an adjudicator, you have to recognize that and be lenient, I guess you could say, or at least have those conversations with your team about that student's submission. The second thing I've noticed that is an issue with video auditions is, yes, it's great. Any student can submit them playing, but it does take out that human element, that in-person element. And so real quickly, what we're doing at the Colts, because I do teach at the Colts Drum Video Corps, we have not done a weekend camp like the Cavaliers or some other groups I've seen on Facebook that have done weekend virtual camps. But we've actually done more of a private lesson type of thing with our video auditions. So a student will submit a video audition of them with already the criteria, the assignments determined. I would submit feedback either through maybe like a Flipgrid. I can just record myself and send it back to them, be like, hey, check this out, watch your playing style here, blah, 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 or I could write it up. But in addition to the video assignments that they've submitted, we also follow up with a direct one-on-one lesson. And with that one-on-one lesson, that Zoom call or that Google Meet or whatever, I'm able to not only evaluate a little bit better with their playing technique, but more importantly, their personality. Because if you're going to be, doing drum corps this year or years forward and you want to continue the video audition aspect, there is that human element of personality you have to consider. Is this student mature enough mentally, socially, things of that nature to participate in the drum corps activity, participate at the higher level of the indoor activity? Am I going to want to educate and be around this student for multiple hours throughout the day? Does their vibe fit with the other auditionees that I'm currently seeing, right? So you do need to make sure you're adjudicating it properly and keeping these things in the back of your mind of not only how they're playing and how they're sounding, but also how are they as regular people. And so I think, yes, video auditions are excellent and probably the way of the future, but you still need to also consider the human interactions and things of that nature.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that one of the things that I would say for students in general is make sure, like, here's one of my biggest pet peeves. You should never have a bad video audition. Like, it just should not exist. You know what I mean? Like, I would say for most students in general, more students than not would have at least a smartphone or some type of something that has a better camera than, the VHS that I filmed my Vanguard video audition on in 2008. Like, your phone's probably better, right? And I didn't want to fly all the way out to California and not have a clue whether or not I had a chance. So I was going to send a video out there and have, Murray Gussick send me an email back and say, okay, you should come out. You know what I'm saying? So I can understand that for most kids doing a video audition. But the other thing is, you should expect that when you are doing a video audition, everything that you do within the video is going to say something about your character, right? Because we can sit there and rewind, unlimited amounts of times to see what it is that you're doing and, what kind of person would send something in with errors. So for one, obviously you want to make sure you have the equipment that John was talking about, have something that is going to present you in the best way. But two, take the time to care enough about your audition to make sure that you are presenting yourself in the best way possible. Because the biggest thing is when you do get to a physical in-person audition is you want to get the most out of the experience. You don't want the adjudicators, instructors to have to tell you something that they've already either said in the packet or they've already said in your video audition in response to your video audition. So I think that's something just as a tidbit for students to recognize is like, make sure that you have those two things in place. I would say the third thing is, if you are a student or a performer that's aspiring to make a certain group, in addition to watching that group to see their style and how they approach things, you should be videoing and adjudicating yourself on a regular basis. I think there is definitely a culture now to where students put up videos on social media of them playing different things. However, I see a very small number of them that actually seem to be thinking critically about the way that they're playing, about their technique, about the way that they sound, about their confidence level and the way that they're performing. There seems to be a small sliver of students that are doing that. So I would say, one, again, make sure that, you have something to present yourself in the best way possible. Two, make sure that you're not, presenting something that has errors in it. And then three, the biggest thing is evaluate yourself. Like anybody in any performance situation is going to want someone who is self-correcting. So you get an opportunity to share that before we even get to know the human element, you interact with other people. We get an opportunity to gauge that by what is this person's level of understanding because this is what they sent in. So I think that's something that you can do before you get to a physical audition that can definitely set you apart and give you a little bit of an advantage on others that are coming in when you're trying to compete for a spot.
Yeah, I think not only does it show your level of understanding, but it shows your level of expectation for yourself. And I think that was a great point, Robert, that you brought up about the bad video assignments, because we've all watched, I know I've watched a handful of video assignments that are And I have to assume, especially in a video audition. Now, with a video assignment, okay, there's a little bit of leeway of like, that's an assignment. But in terms of an audition, like if you're auditioning for a group, as an instructor, our assumption is that video is the very best that you are capable of. It is very different from a rehearsal standpoint or an assignment standpoint. Goal is to give you information to make you better. Okay. And I think sometimes we get confused, especially with the new video audition stuff, of we run so many live auditions like clinics that video auditions are not the same thing. Clinics are interactive. Okay. Clinics are give and take. Give us what you got and take what we give you in terms of information. A video audition is give us your stuff and we evaluate you. And we'll give you some feedback. You can take that feedback, but that feedback is meant to make you better than where you are, not help you learn more like a clinic-based situation is. Because every group I think I work with runs clinic audition where kids come in into like clinic-only participants. So they're just there to get information. They like come from a bad band program, not a bad band program, but a program that doesn't have as much to offer, and they're looking for other avenues of education, and they're just there for that. They have no interest or no ability to participate in the activity. Whereas if you're sending in a video, our assumption is you have the ability, you have the finances put away and figured out, and you're gonna do this. Okay, now this is the very best that you're capable of right now. And then our decision is this enough to work with to be able to mold you into what we need you to be? Or do we need to help you find another avenue, whether that be another group or take lessons for a year or find a different instrument? And for students, yes, the equipment is important in terms of what you're recording, but I also think that any instructor or evaluator that is doing video auditions and has done video auditions over the last 9 months or a year even, okay, understands that through a computer screen, nothing sounds the way that it does in real life. So if your hands are moving the way that they're supposed to be moving, and your audio is not like superior quality, don't allow that to detract you from auditioning still. Like most evaluators can look at that and be like, the mechanics are all there. Yeah, it sounds funky, but is it just because I'm watching it through Flipgrid or Zoom or whatever. But again, our evaluation is that's how their hands are moving. That's the very best understanding. And that is their expectation for themselves of what that is. And that's not something that you can, once you make that impression, that's your impression. There's not like you don't get better through a week. Like you can get better through a weekend camp. Like that's your first impression, your video assignment. So if you turn in a not stellar video assignment, that's a not stellar first impression. And then you don't get to fix that impression until the next video assignment or the next video audition, assuming you get a second video audition. So I think it's really important that students, like Robert was saying, evaluate themselves, but evaluate their own expectations, because I think as someone who teaches on the world-class level, that is the biggest thing I take away, that I try to take away from video assignments, is not how do they play necessarily, but what is their expectation from themselves. Because if this is the best they expect of themselves in an audition, it's not going to get better than this in rehearsal. Like this is the maximum they're capable of. For them to get better from here, they need more, they need time and information. Okay, how much information do you need is what I'm evaluating, and how much time do I have to give you that information? And if these things work, solid, let's go. If you need this much information and we got this much time to do it in, sorry. Either either find out where you can develop at the proper ability level and timeline, or you have to send in a better video audition.
I think we also got to mention that there is no shame in having somebody look at your audition before you send it off. And this, I feel like, has, for lack of a better analogy, shot a lot of people in the foot for the video auditions that I've seen in the past for performers that have come into the drum corps lane, is that they literally have not watched their video themselves, or they have just not had a band director, an instructor, or a friend just look at it and just say critically, would you look at this and accept it as an audition? Because, you know, it's one thing to receive parameters, like John was saying, have parameters listed, which for all of our video auditions we do. But then it's another thing to completely disregard those parameters and then add a little bit extra on top of that. And it's like, well, did you get some conscious feedback? And I mean, just not even looking at the playing, not even looking at how it sounds, just does it look like an audition? Like if you wouldn't play rap music in an audition, it probably shouldn't be in an audition video. Plain and simple. I'm just putting that out there. That's just basic parameters of what does an audition look like. And I think that's some of that is the culture that we're in, is to our respect, that some students are so used to the current and now of doing what they do for social media and thinking that that is worthy of what an audition is. And yes, we do want your personalities to speak for what it is, but we also, to Ryan's perspective, want to look at the fact that, is this the best that you're capable of if we were sitting inside of a live audition? And I feel like you still have a responsibility, I'd say, to put your best foot forward. Like if you're going in for a job interview, anywhere that you're going in for a job interview, even if I were going to job interview at TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, I wouldn't walk in there with just a pair of jeans on and a t-shirt and say, this is how I am. You got to take me as I am because this is the culture, bro. I would still have a level of expectation set for professionalism that says I am the right person for this job. And if this allows me to completely breathe out my personality once I have been accepted for the role, I am all good for that. You know what I mean? I can wear jeans to work every day. I'm totally okay with that. But that first impression, though, is so important because I think one thing people don't consider when they're sending in video auditions is they don't know how many people are going to watch that audition video. And it's like you're sending it and it's like, well, is only the caption head watching it? Well, maybe not. Maybe the caption head and every instructor on the roster is watching it. Maybe the corps director is watching it. Maybe some of the board of directors are watching it. You don't know how many people in that circle of instruction is going to be categorizing that video to determine, are you a good fit for this organization? Because one thing that I learned coming into teaching drum corps is that we were working with a corps where the corps director wanted to sit down and have a meeting with every single student during the audition camp as like an interview. Are you good for this organization? And I would gear to say that most organizations do that. Most organizations, they sit down and they want to just have a conversation with you to see, are you a good fit for this organization? So when you're sending in a video audition, if you don't have an opportunity to do that, me seeing that audition for the first time is going to give me a lot of background information of what I need to know about you as an individual, or at least what you have shown me as an individual, right? I'm saying quotation marks because you can look at my like video setup and you can see, okay, if it's in this frame, I'm okay with you seeing it right now. if I wasn't okay with you seeing it right now, then I would need to remove it from this frame. And that's kind of the same thing when you're doing that video audition. It's so much more of an interview of your personality than it is of kind of everything else. And I mean, like, the playing comes into play, how everything sounds. Yes, all that comes into play. But that first impression of exactly who it is that you are, and the fact that you sent this out to say, this is a representation of me, a full representation of me, that cannot be said enough for students that are sending out these videos with the awareness that, well, maybe just the techs are going to look at it, or maybe just, one person's going to look. No, assume that it's going to be seen everywhere. You know what I mean? And I think if you come with that conscious assumption, you'll think a little more critically about everything that's contained in that video from a totality standpoint, not just what you're doing behind the instrument, whether it's playing or marching, etc.
Real quick, I X that out, cut that out. Yes. I would like approval from Elanders, Ryan, and Robert, if it will be okay if I share our parameters at Southwind, what students and educators should expect if they were going to follow our process for video auditions. Okay, I see head nods from everyone, so just want to make sure we're all good. All right, so if you're listening right now, here is our summary at Southwind of our expectations for a video audition. So number one, again, it goes back to like it's an interview process. We want to see your best foot forward. So how you dress, how you stand, all of those matter. We would like the camera to be stationed horizontally, far enough that if you're a drummer, we can see your feet. If you're a keyboard player, that we can see the top part of your body and the keyboard, so we can evaluate playing zones and things like that. In addition, make sure you have all your prepared materials with you. We have in the past seen students play an exercise, stop midway through, run out the door, run back in with a piece of paper they forgot, and continue the exercise. That's not the best first impression. So number one, make sure, again, your camera's stationed appropriately. Test out a couple sound levels if you're a little bit more professional or experienced with the computer and mixing and things of that nature. Like everyone's already said in this podcast, I mean, the phones of today, the technology, it's pretty much high quality, and it's pretty much it's going to be a good option for you. Have your prepared materials. Make sure you have a metronome and it's audible. We have to evaluate as drummers your rhythmic integrity and your internal sense of pulse. And so we can, even if there's no metronome, we can evaluate all those things, but we also want you to be conscious of your own playing and to have a little bit of that pressure of being absolutely perfect with the metronome, so that we know that you know that you're good enough to hopefully be with us, right? Besides the playing aspect, here's some extra sauce, some extra credit, I guess you could say. We do like an intro, maybe with your name, where you're from. And it doesn't have to be like, hey, my name is John Gaal, I'm from blah, blah, blah. But even just like a text print on iMovie or whatnot, you can provide that. And if you're going to send multiple videos, for example, video 1, 30 seconds is you playing eights, video 2, bucks, etc., etc. When you upload that onto YouTube, which is the platform that we ask you to make all your videos unlisted so no one has to see except whoever has the link, put all those videos in a playlist instead of us having to individually go find it and do extra work. Because again, remember, you're probably not the only one submitting a video for the audition, and we want to make sure we're maximizing our time so that we can provide the most feedback to each student appropriately. So just do the work on your end to, again, be as professional as possible, put all the videos in the playlist. And then with each video, if you can just put like a small title, hey, this is, again, eights at, here's the tempo, bucks at, here's the tempo. That just adds that little nuance of, hey, I'm a little bit more professional than maybe my other auditionees. Please consider me. And then one last thing that we do with our video auditions is we do ask, because of that human element, that social interaction, we do ask that you provide us a short interview. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're auditioning, what's your background, just so we can, again, see that personality. We've already evaluated your playing style. Now we want to evaluate your personality and see if you're going to be a good fit for us. Besides that, I think that's everything. I think that's a short summary of what we look for. Guys, is there anything I'm missing that I forgot to talk about in our parameters?
I want to say the only other thing we ask for is usually like a short little excerpt of something that they're comfortable with, because we also find that it's important to not only play the material that we've presented to them, the audition material, but then something that they're terribly comfortable with, so that it shows them in their best light for something that they should be ultra familiar with. Because I think, a lot of the times, even though you may have worked day and night on material that somebody has given you, if it's something that you have honed your skills on and something you've played in the past, a lot of the times we're going to see a better level of performance. And that's just basic performance level, because it's something that you've already internalized all of the muscle memory, etc. And a lot of the times when you're in an audition situation, especially with audition music, you may not be at the level of performance quality yet. It may still be very mechanical. So while we can evaluate the mechanical and say you play really well, you've got great sound, but the performance aspect has not started to show itself yet, that's not going to disqualify you from an audition necessarily, but you being able to demonstrate something that you're already comfortable with will kind of give us a heads up on what we can expect from a performance level once you have internalized something and you've been playing it for a long stint of time. Because for a lot of places that are auditioning, you're talking about an extended season, and by the time you finish that season, you should be at a performance level of everything that you've learned, even the exercises, right? We expect the exercises that we're playing in the finals parking lot to look fantastic and on performance level quality that somebody could come record, so that if somebody reviewing that from the outside, they would be able to internalize that and see what is it that you're doing, what does it look like to perform these exercises within the frame of this group, right? So that's one thing that we want to see is, how does your personality speak out with something that you're familiar with?
One thing that I want to ask you guys that kind of came up in my head, so we're talking about video auditions and giving students a lot of information. I like to know how you guys use video assignments to chart the progress of your groups and students. Like, how do you guys use that within your own system of teaching?
Well, for me, at the high school level, I use the assignments as like an assessment for grades. And because of the whole COVID situation, my assessments from a grade standpoint has changed multiple times since the beginning of the school year, just because we're trying, the band director and myself, we're trying to find the best way to connect with the students, since most of our students, I'd say about 90% of our students, are all virtual. Since we probably only have a max of 6, out of 60, we have a very small band. Out of 60 students, 6 come to class. So having to evaluate based on everything we've already talked about, we've had to change our parameters throughout the year. But with the video assignments as assessments, we have found that having the students play a short segment of maybe whatever we're working on in class helps just give them that buffer of, they can see their process, since we meet every other day, of the short segments of whatever we're working on, whether it's an exercise, concert music, solos, whatever. But we do have one Flipgrid assignment due on Sunday every week. That's more of a longer exercise, in hopes that A, the student's practicing over the weekend, but B, also so that the student can see, okay, I worked on these small in-class assessments, had to turn on the video, play in front of everyone, etc., etc. But now on Sunday, it's putting that all together. It's just me and the camera. Here's what I'm putting forward for the director. And so far, we found that, at least for our group, that has been the best way to adjudicate from a grade standpoint and also to build confidence with the students.
Yeah, I've basically used it for the same reasons, just for doing assignments for a grading purpose. I have done it a little bit more recently in terms of almost like a teaching music or a refining music tool, so that I can introduce my students to a percussion ensemble piece, and then to make sure that they're not just working on it or not only focused on it during class. I'll assign them like play A to B or B to C through Flipgrid, and that way I can evaluate that. But I think the other thing it allows me to do, and I've used it for, is to take the assessment and then create a lesson plan and evaluate, is what I'm doing working, or is it time to change the course of the ship a little bit and either dial up instruction because they're ready to move faster, or dial it back because they're not getting what I'm trying to get them. You know, I'm a little bit more fortunate where most of my students are in person. Oh, actually, I would say 98% of my students are in person, and then I just have a couple kids at home. But both in person and at home students are getting Flipgrids for the same.
I'm jealous.
Reasons.
I'm jealous.
I know you are, John. I know you are. But I think it's a way that I can evaluate on the weekend and set up a game plan for the week or game plan for the next day, and not have to think after a long day of like, well, what did I do back in first period at 8:20 in the morning and it's 5 o'clock at night and I'm trying to think of what to do. I have their videos. I can just watch that and I can make sure that I'm not like trying to remember what we did, but like, all right, this is what we did. This is where they're at. Either full steam ahead or drop anchor and putter around here for a little bit while they get caught up.
One additional thing I'll say, tying to what Ryan just said about kind of seeing your processes from an adjudicator's standpoint, you can see however long you've been using, like, for example, I've been using Flipgrid, however long you've been using whatever video software to assess your students. When you go back and do your yearly review at the end of the school year, you can kind of see the process and how long it took to teach a concept. And you can even keep those video files and share with future students of what's good, what's bad, what to look forward to. And so you can kind of dial in and start creating your individual process of like, I'm going to spend X amount of weeks on buzz rolls, X amount of weeks on this scale, et cetera, because you know, and you have video proof, video evidence of that's kind of what happened in your previous year.
That's also a way that a kid can measure their own progress too. Just, you brought that up in my head, John, of like the kid can watch their first video assignment to their last video assignment, and then you can honestly be like, look how much better you got, and think about how much work you put in, and then be real with them and like, was it a lot, was it a little? Most of them, I would imagine, not everywhere, but my students would say that was a little bit of work, but they made a ton of progress. All right, well, now imagine if you put in a little bit more work or a lot more work, or just took your work more seriously. Think of if you went from A to N through the alphabet, you could maybe go A to X, Y, or Z through a whole year.
Yeah, I think especially as far as tracking progress, specifically, I would say as an instructor, if you're for marching band and like indoor drum on and stuff like that, I feel like it's even more important then, just because you have such a distinct goal that you're like driving towards. Obviously, we have concerts and percussion ensemble stuff that we're driving towards. But I think that the same way that we plan our rehearsals backwards, it would be great to plan our video assignments backwards as well. You know what I mean? To set the expectation of, what it is that we expect students to know by a certain time. I expect you to be able to do the warm-up sequence at these tempos by this camp or by this time to know this, that, or whatever. So I think that's something that those instructors that may not be necessarily using video assignments, I would encourage you to kind of pivot towards that and use that to your advantage, because I mean, I think that we all want to be the best that we can be. We want our students to be the best that they can be. You know, gone are the days where we come into band camp and it's like, oh, no one knows the warm-up packet. All right, let's teach that. Like, use the video assignments to your advantage. If you've already set the line and you already have students on the instruments that they're going to be on, then set the expectation that, hey, when we get to band camp, we're moving forward. We're not going to go back and like reteach every single thing that we've already done. In addition to assessing where students are with their understanding of the information, it also sets a bar that, hey, I need to at least grasp whatever this is by this date, which gives them something to shoot for as well. So I would encourage any instructors that aren't already using video assignments, or maybe you haven't created them, to go ahead and start letting that be something in your arsenal that you use, that you want students to be able to do certain things by a certain amount of time. Because the other thing is too, because we're responsible for so many different things, it can be hard to see the progress over time. You know what I mean? And you can wind up getting to a show or getting to the concert, you're like, why doesn't this sound good? Well, it's hard because you haven't evaluated the students or where you are in 3 weeks. So if you have those little checkpoints to evaluate yourself regularly, it makes it a little bit easier, and the students can see what they're transforming into and how they're getting better.
And speaking of checkpoints, Rob, to jump on that as well, depending on, again, how well your program is developed, your relationship with your students, et cetera, using video assignments for the winter season, over winter break, and again, getting ready for marching band over the summer, I think is a great opportunity. If you haven't been doing that with this whole, again, new age with COVID, you can't see the students in person all the time. So having those small checkpoints throughout the summer, like, okay, marching band is from this week to this week. We need to make sure in June or at the end of May or wherever your school season ends, all right, we need to have this assignment down, this exercise learned, this marching technique good to go. So then when you hit the ground running and everyone is hopefully in person next year, or even if they're not, you already have a strong foundation, and that the student is learning and practicing year long so that they're making that upward trajectory instead of going up during school year, then they step back a little bit over winter break, the summer, then they keep pushing forward, like hills and valleys.
I'll say for Southwind in the past, Rob has been like the best executive director of video assignments I've ever worked with, ever. Just when you talk about making sure that you plan for those checkpoints throughout the season to make sure that they hit from the skill sets that we're looking for to exact points in the music that we're trying to make sure that we nail down. The importance of that for each student and the recognition cannot be said enough, because if you want to, if you're shooting for a 4-week gap space, talking about your camp's going to be at the end of a 4-week span, that's 4 weeks now that you can use that time, whether you do weekly assignments or you do bi-weekly assignments, to make sure that you have now touched on all of the things that you have for an expectation by the time that they reach that live standpoint. And definitely don't forget the visual component. I want to make sure that that's said for all of our marching percussionists that are out there. If you do plan on your kids being on the move, you've got to get them moving at home, because you cannot expect them to do what you ask them to do inside of a visual rehearsal if they have not been working on that pliability and those stretching, those techniques at home, because that's a long stint of time, especially if they're doing weekend warrior stuff that they have not been in the habit with everybody else. So that can't be said enough. But the planning for it, specifically for what you want to accomplish by the time you get to the next rehearsal, is so important because it gives them a level of expectation. It gives you a level of expectation of what you expect. And then it also gives them an extreme accountability measure by the time that they show back up, so that you can now look at them and say, okay, when I handed this out to you the last time that we met, this was the expectation that we set of what would be achieved by the time that we got here. We're now 4 weeks later. Did everybody get there? And if you didn't, what percentage level are you at? Are you at 80% there? Are you at 70% there? Are you at 50% there? Are you at 20% because you really didn't do anything over this last 4 weeks, right? But, you know, for the students that are at 20%, now you have to figure out, is this worth continuing for you if it's a voluntary thing, if it's extracurricular, or is it, do we need to reassign you to a different instrument so that you can have a greater level of success when it comes to moving through the assignments? Or is it something to the point of, do I need to light a little fire under you so that we can get through this hump together? You know what I mean? Like, that's going to help us in that scenario. But planning for the next time that you're going to meet is very beneficial for engaging those students for a long standpoint of time. And then also for the director of having direct accountability measures for our students when we give them something to do.
And I want to say, just to jump on what E said, I think I heard, I think it might have been Marcus Hawkins, who's a friend of Elanders and mine, that said that I plan every rehearsal as if every student does not practice. I would say that most students, especially if you're in high school, hopefully in drum corps and WGI, like most students are a little bit more motivated. But the other thing that you have that I think that video assignments helps with is it helps force, in a sense, students to keep up and to practice a little bit. Because let's be honest, some of our students are more motivated than others. I would say, depending on what, gaming or social media or whatever they're into, they may be less or more motivated to actually engage with physical sticks and pads and mallets and etc. But I feel like video assignments definitely helps them to be forced to actually evaluate a little bit more regularly too. So that's something that I think that helps more than anything. And like E said about building an expectation, I think it also can build an anticipation for rehearsal. Because those students have been working on that. They've been getting better at it. And now they're like, I'm ready for the next rehearsal because we're going to put it all together. I'm excited to see everyone else's progress. So I think that's something that we can galvanize as instructors to motivate our students, is for them to practice together, see each other's evaluations, if it's possible, if that's the route that you want to go, so that you can build that anticipation to where kids are busting down the doors, like ready to get in there and rehearse, because they know that everybody else has been working hard. They've been working hard. They're ready to put it together.
I just thought of one thing when you were talking, and when you're talking about the students seeing each other. If you're a director, one thing that you could try is doing a video of the week. And this could be something to an extent of like a reward basis to recognize students that are actually putting in good work. Or you can do a most improved video of the week. I find a lot of the times, and I'm thinking back to what we do inside of like corporate training, is like recognizing, individual effort, and then seeing how recognized individual effort can also be a motivator for other participants. Sometimes it can be, sometimes it can't. So you just have to wager the level of recognition that you utilize. Make sure that it's, obviously you don't want to go overboard, because then it can turn into favoritism to a certain extent. But I think some level of recognition, especially if somebody's doing things consistently, it looks good, can work as an example for other students to say, this is a good thing to model things after. But then B, it can also work as a level of motivation, because we know a lot of the times students aren't always able to see what their other compatriots are doing, especially if they're just being sent to the director. But then now it can say, hey, this is the most improved student of the week, or this is the best assignment that we received on this particular assignment, especially if you're doing like rudiment pass-offs. Then it can show as a level of example of everybody needs to strive to get to this point. And what is this student doing and why is it? You can't forget the why, because if you don't talk about the why, then students can't connect to why I should be modeling after this. But if you connect to the why behind something's being done well, then students can start to self-critique on their own to say, this is how I'm doing it. Now I can look and see the comparison. Oh, I see how they did it. This is what I can do to increase my level of effort or change how I approach it or increase my level of sound, timbre, et cetera, et cetera. Timbre, excuse me. Ugh.
Well,
Timber.
That's the nice thing with Flipgrid too, is that every student can watch each other. And what I've done is have the students watch each other's video and then vote on who had the best video, and not only vote, but why they thought each other had the best video, because then that gives me an understanding of what they are critical of. And you'd be amazed to find out that at all levels, that students sometimes are more critical of the things that are maybe less important and less critical of the things that are maybe more important. Like I did with a group, we watched some Flipgrids and the kids were like being super nitpicky about like, well, this kid overplayed this height and their taps weren't as beefy as their accents and this and that and this and that. Meanwhile, nobody talked about the fact that the kid played out of time. It's like, oh. So we're talking about accents and taps in our video lesson, our video class, but we all forgot that like, hey, our job first and foremost is to like play with the thing that goes beep, beep, beep. So let's all focus on this because nothing else is important until that is solid, and so I think that's a really good way to use video assignments as well. And then I would encourage you, if you're a new director to video assignments, to not shy away from video assignments that are not like overly prepared and just a snapshot of what a kid has. Like if you're on a video call or even in a live rehearsal, be like, all right, you got 10 minutes to spread out, grab a drink of water, use the restroom, send me a Flipgrid. You get one rep and that's it. Make sure that you're set up, ready to go. Because what our goal is as instructors is eventually to get kids to be like good on the first rep. I've never been in a percussion ensemble concert or at a WGI event where they're like, you know what, time out, that sucked. We got a better one. Let's do it. Okay, reset to the top. So using that to be like, all right, especially if you couple that with a very prepared video and be like, all right, this is where you're at when you're like maximum focus achievement. You played it a little bit. So this is the gap between what you're capable of and what you can do on a first rep. And the ultimate goal is to get this gap to be like this or non-existent. So there's a way to use video assessments and video assignments to shrink that gap as well, to put kids in a spot where they got to do that, but it's also a little bit of a safer environment for the students. Not like they're in danger, but it's more safe for them because they don't have to stand there and listen to each other play down the line. Like kids get nervous, especially high school kids. Like when they know they're coming up next and they just heard, Susie crush it, and they're like, I'm not going to play as good as Susie. And now they got a little tinkle going on and they don't play as well as they should. If you can just spread them out and be like, all right, you all got phones, you all got smartphones, just record it to Flipgrid. One shot, come back. That's it. I think that's a really good tool. And it gives the kids the comfort of like, not everybody has to listen to me play live. Even if you're going to watch it, when they're playing, there's that little security blanket for them. So I think that's a good way also as a director to use that as a tool. I know we've talked a lot about like, be super prepared, do this, but I think especially at the high school level, those types of video assessments are really important too, to let the kids see like on one shot, if we had to walk in, if the truck breaks down and we got to unload and go, this is what you got.
Well, I hope that you guys have really enjoyed this episode and this conversation. I think that I definitely got a couple things or more than a couple things that I can take away from all these perspectives. And I hope this helps us all to continue to sharpen our tools that we have in our education bag and things that we can do to help our programs get better, help our students improve, and to, help ourselves continue to improve as educators as well. So if you want to connect with us, you can always join the conversation by connecting with us on Instagram or on YouTube at Volta Percussion. All right. And you can also send us any questions or topics or anything that you have at voltapercussion@gmail.com. So I think that's it for this episode, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.
Bye-bye.